Very warm welcome to OmniFocus Workflows with Kaitlin Salzke, and I'm really happy to have Kaitlin here today. I've been following her work for quite some time, especially around Omni Automation, and she's got some very interesting and innovative ways to using OmniFocus. I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot from being here today, and I'm sure you will as well. Just before I hand it over to Kaitlin, I just want to talk a little bit about Learn OmniFocus for those of you who are new to this platform. And I originally launched Learn OmniFocus back in June of 2014. So we're coming close to our 8th anniversary now, which is very exciting. And the goal from the beginning is to support people in living a fulfilling and productive life with some help from OmniFocus. And in brackets, you'll see in complementary productivity apps, because trying to use OmniFocus for too many things, even though it's definitely a great app, can lead to kind of overwhelming the system. So I really look at teaching productivity principles, which ones are best applied within OmniFocus, and what are some other apps that help kind of complete the picture there. And what we're going through now is one of the Learn OmniFocus live sessions, and these fall into 4 categories. There's sessions that cover productivity themes. So I just did one recently on how to bring ideas to life. We've done ones on checklists. On Sunday, maybe a lot of the core productivity principles. So you can learn more about these principles and also how you can apply them using OmniFocus and other apps. I've been doing some deep dive on specific apps, so how to use OmniFocus with a specific app, and I'll be announcing the next one in just a moment. And then I've had many workflow guests on over the years. And the beauty of having workflow guests on is it shows the many different ways that OmniFocus can be used, and the many different approaches, the many different styles, and take what's useful from each of these workflow guests. Maybe your system is very close to what someone else is using. Maybe it's quite different, but there's one element that you really like from the way they're doing it. So this really adds a real richness to our library. And then there's the interactive group sessions. This is where you get to really meet and get to know people within our international community. We've had people join, I think it's from 87 countries now. So there's a really interesting mix of people. I find they're very supportive groups. So a little taste of what's coming soon. First of all, something that I've been leading for years is what I call office hours. And these are small group sessions. There's a maximum of 10 people per session. They're purposely not recorded, so people can share things that they maybe wouldn't want put onto a recording. And I ask that people keep everything confidential. Everyone's on camera. And this is where you can come maybe to get some inspiration, some motivation around using OmniFocus, or you have specific questions, or if there's things that you want to share, you're very welcome to attend these sessions. And I typically offer them 3 times a month, and there's currently 5 of them open for registration. A couple more this month, and then there's three open for registration in April. And then one that I launched very recently, it was just last month actually, is what's called virtual co-working. And I heard from a lot of people that they were putting a lot of things into OmniFocus, but not really making the time to actually work on these things. So these are an opportunity to come and spend most of the time working. So there's 3 25-minute focus sessions, and you're working on whatever it is while you have all of the other participants visible on camera. So it's kind of like being in a library or a co-working space. You see the other people working, and you'll probably find it makes it easier for you to focus as well. And then we do a welcome session. You'll be in a small group, usually 2 or 3 people at the beginning, and then you'll check in with that same group in between the focus sessions, and then again at the end. So you can kind of get some accountability around that. You can share what you're learning, where you get distracted, what you're finding is really working for doing focus work. So it's really a way to kind of build that focus muscle and to get to know people in the community. And to add a social element, I open the meeting 10 minutes before the start time and keep it open 10 minutes after. So you can just come and hang out, and I call it the virtual lounge, and just have a chat and get to know some people a little bit better that way. So you can learn more about these by going to learnomnifocus.com/virtual-co-working. And there's currently 1 more session this month, and that'll be next week. And then there's 4 sessions open for registration in April as well. And I try to vary the time times and days quite a bit to hopefully accommodate as many people as possible. And as I mentioned, I've done some focus session on how to use OmniFocus with specific apps. So we've done ones around Asana and DevonThink, Drafts, and MindNode. And the next app that I'm going to feature is one I've been using for about 15 years now. So I know it inside out and backwards. And that's a business management and CRM called Daylight. And like OmniFocus, this is designed specifically for Apple devices, so for the Mac, the iPhone, and the iPad, and developed by a company called Market Circle that really has been living and breathing Apple technologies for many, many years. So if you haven't used Daylight before, this is a peek of what it looks like. It's a way to organize your contacts and calendars and sales pipelines and things like that. It can be used by a team of one. It could be used by larger teams as well. And I'll be going through talking about how Daylight and OmniFocus can interact, how you can link the two, how you can automate some interactions between the two apps. So really looking forward to that. And that'll be on April 27th, which is a Wednesday from 10 to 11 Pacific Daylight Time. And registration is open for that one as well. And lastly, before I introduce Kaitlin, OmniFocus 4 is coming along very nicely. I take a look at it pretty much daily at this point, and I've been giving a lot of feedback to the Omni group. So that's well on its way. And the goal is to have some content for OmniFocus 4 ready to go when it launches or very soon after. And in the meantime, continuing to develop content based on OmniFocus 3. And conceptually, if you establish solid workflows in OmniFocus 3, I think you'll find they carry over very naturally to OmniFocus 4. So any efforts you're putting in now certainly won't be lost. They'll be enhanced, if anything. And without further ado, I'm happy to introduce Kaitlin Salzke. And Kaitlin is joining us from Wagga Wagga, which is in New South Wales in Australia. And I definitely had to look this one up on the map. And it's about halfway between Melbourne and Sydney. So I've learned a little bit about Wagga Wagga. I've done a little, I believe Wagga means crow, and Wagga Wagga means many crows. You can correct me if I'm wrong there, Kaitlin. Just to point you to a few great online resources that Kaitlin shares. First is her website, KaitlinSalzke.com. And she's got some great OmniFocus related posts. She's just recently been posting a lot on there, talking about some of the details of her system, talking about how she has it organized, different perspectives, and so forth. So she'll be covering some of that today, but if you want to take a deeper dive into some of the details, definitely recommend checking out her posts. And she also has I think probably the largest library of OmniFocus plugins, except for maybe Salzke. You might win the trophy on that one, but she has a great collection of plugins, and some of these I use regularly, especially her one for OmniFocus templates I find extremely useful. So you can go to the OmniFocus plugins page there. And if you say, I really wish I could add this feature to OmniFocus that maybe it's so specific to you, it's probably never going to get added to the app itself, you can get in touch with Kaitlin about getting a custom plugin done, and she can let you know if it's possible. And you might have your very own custom plugin, so you can check out the Request a Custom OmniFocus Plugin page for more information there. And you can follow Kaitlin over on Twitter at Kaitlin Salzke. And then it's my pleasure to pass you over to Kaitlin and take it away.
I'm super excited to be here. So thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really excited to geek out a little bit about OmniFocus and particularly Omni Automation, as you said. So I think I've got lots I want to cover, so I might just dive straight into it. So I thought probably the most logical place to start with how I'm using OmniFocus is to have a look at this view that you should be able to see now, which is what I think of as my OmniFocus dashboard, I guess. So this is what I'm looking at probably 95% of the time as I'm going throughout my day. I have a very similar view set up on my iPhone using widgets. So I have these same 6 perspectives on my home screen, and I can see these all the time. So OmniFocus is sort of front and center for me, no matter what device I'm looking at. So just to quickly run through these perspectives, as Tim said, I've been sort of publishing some more details about the mechanics of how these are constructed and things like that over on my website this week. So if you're interested in the actual detail of the rules and things of how I've built these, then that's there for you. But I'll just give you a quick sort of high-level summary for today. If you have a look at the first perspective that I got here is anything that's due soon. So that is anything that's due soon and available. So for me, I have that setting in OmniFocus set to the next 3 days. And it also includes anything that's remaining that's due today. And that's kind of serves two purposes. So one is as a backup to make sure that nothing kind of slips through the cracks and accidentally has something blocking it and I don't see it and miss it. And the other purpose is just to keep it front of mind throughout the day. If I've got something due, but I can't act on it until, 6 o'clock tonight, I still want to kind of have in the back of my head that I know it's there, just so that I don't miss it, because I won't assign a due date unless it's important. And it's something that actually needs to get done. So that's my first perspective here. You'll notice that the icons that I've set for these perspectives are actually numbers. So I try to work through these generally in order. So I'll work from, or at least look at them and decide, no, I'm not going to do that task right now. I'm going to come back to it later. So I'll start with 1 and I'll go down to 2 and down to 3 and then up here to 4, 5, and then down to this one, which doesn't actually have a number, but is essentially the 6th perspective. Habits, I have, as I said prior to the session, I'm keeping absolutely everything in OmniFocus. So this has a lot of recurring tasks. This perspective stays more or less, it follows the same patterns throughout the course of each week generally. So I'm not really editing tasks in here. It's kind of set up and it just ticks along. I tick off tasks as they come up and then they go away until it's time to do them again. And so habits for me, what goes into this perspective is anything that's kind of something I want to do as soon as it becomes available. I want to do it that day. So things like exercise, things like making sure my bathroom is clean, just basically stuff to keep life ticking along at a functional level really is what comes into here. And I'll come back in a minute to the sort of the distinction between what I would consider a habit and what I put in this routine perspective. I'll circle back to that in a second. But my third perspective is this today perspective. And broadly, that basically is anything that's flagged. And that, again, will come back to how things get pulled into this perspective, because a lot of that happens sort of automatically on a day-to-day basis, just through some magic of Omni Automation there as well. So we'll come back to that, but broadly that's anything that's flagged. So that tends to be bigger, like I guess the bigger rocks of my day. This is the thing, that's stuff I want to make progress on today. So uni work or say preparing for this session. I planned out sort of when I was going to do that, and when it came time to do it, it popped up into this perspective. Typically in a day, I'm pretty happy if I've cleared these 3 first perspectives. I don't mind necessarily if I don't get into the next ones over here. A good day for me is one where I completely clear these 3. I'll be happy with that. But then when I get a chance, I come on and I continue on to these other perspectives over here. So ASAP for me is something that usually is something that's time sensitive, but it's not necessarily due at a particular time. So I guess an example of that would be if I've got an email I want to respond to, someone sent me a question and I'd like to get back to them. That might come in here. It's not due. I don't have to get back to them in the next 2 days, for example. Obviously, work things might be a bit different to that. If I've got actual client work that someone's paying me to do, or that I'm being paid to do. But if someone's just asked me a question and I'd like to help them out with, I don't know, a question about OmniFocus or Omni Automation or something, for example, if you send me after this session, it might pop up in here. So I'll get to that kind of as soon as I get a chance. Routine, as I said, to me, this perspective differs slightly from habits. So it's more things that recur and come up, and when it comes time to do them, they need to be done, but they don't necessarily need to be done right away. It's not a habit I'm trying to build. So things like I have to back up my computer on a regular basis, or every 6 months I should make an appointment with the dentist and go and see the dentist. As I said, I don't need to do those right now as soon as they become available, but I sort of want to become aware of them when they become available so that I can act on them when I have a spare moment. And then down here in the last perspective is my starred perspective. So that picks up anything that's available that matches this star search term. So typically what I'll do as part of my weekly review is go through and add a little star emoji to the end of a couple of projects. Usually about 2 to 4 projects is the sweet spot for me. I'm studying a university course at the moment. So if I've got 2 subjects that I'm doing, so usually that will take up 2 slots, maybe 3 if I've got an assignment due, and then maybe I'll add something else in, sort of depending on what's going on. They're kind of my I guess the bigger projects that I'm focusing on at the moment. So I'll work on them as soon as I've got a chance, and sometimes I will plan those out, so they will gradually come into my today view. But that's anything else that's available that I could do on those. If I have an amazing day and I clear all of these perspectives, and they're a little bit, I've got a bit of a list growing here at the moment because I've been working on preparing the session for the last couple of days. So this is sort of a realistic view of what it looks like after a couple of days of being fairly distracted by other stuff. But in the next day or 2, I'll knock all of this out pretty quickly. So this is what I'm typically looking at. So I think that made most sense to start with. Obviously, you might be looking at this and thinking window management might be a nightmare with this, because I've got 6 windows. Creating these and dragging them around and moving them where I want them might be a bit of a hassle. And I'm basically managing that using Keyboard Maestro. So I have a Keyboard Maestro macro set up. Again, that's published on over on my website this week. So if you want to have a look at that and sort of tweak it to do what you need it to do, you can go ahead and do that. And I just have that linked up with a Alfred keyword. So in terms of actually generating this view, it's actually quite straightforward. All I would do is invoke Alfred, and I would type in set up OmniFocus dashboard here. I can choose a slightly different version as to whether I'm looking at my work or my personal tasks. So I have those separated in different folders. And as you might notice here, that I'm focusing on my personal projects at the moment. If I choose B and C, which is where I work, obviously then we will focus on those tasks instead. But it's a very similar sort of setup. And I'm gonna stick with mostly the personal side of things today, just because obviously confidentiality and things, I've had to delete most of what's in my the work side of things in my database. So to run it, I literally would just hit enter, and Keyboard Maestro will do its thing. So it takes a couple of seconds, but that's all I have to do to kind of have this set up. So it's not hard, and it typically sits there all day. It's pretty rare that I have to recreate it unless I accidentally close a window or something like that, which does happen from time to time. We talked a little bit before the session about the fact that I keep absolutely everything in OmniFocus, from the really tiny minutiae of everything that I do on a day-to-day basis through to bigger projects. And I think that's probably a lot of what has, I guess, precipitated this setup. So if I was only keeping the big chunky stuff in OmniFocus, I wouldn't need all of this. To be honest, I could probably have one today list, maybe make sure it pulled in everything that was due soon, and then maybe a second starred list that I went to when I was looking for more to do. That would be a totally valid setup. I find for me it's helpful to have everything there, particularly over the course of the last, I guess, probably 14 plus months. So my son's 14 months old now. And I know that in that time, having had all of the really basic stuff that has to get done just to keep things functional has at times been quite useful. If I'm sick, if neither of us have slept, if everything's a disaster and there's a 4-week-old baby in the house, sometimes it's quite useful to have a reminder that actually, yes, Kaitlin, you do need to wash your hair. You do need to drink a glass of water, go for a walk. That has actually been quite useful. And I think, obviously, that's a little bit specific to my situation, but there's also a certain, there's a level of dopamine hit from ticking off a task. In sort of a more chaotic situation, it's been quite beneficial. So it's not for everyone, definitely keeping all of these things in OmniFocus. And I certainly understand the argument to the contrary, but for me, it works really well. And because I keep everything in there, the habit of checking OmniFocus and doing what it says to do is so ingrained at this point that if there's something else that I want to add, a new habit that I'd like to build or something like that, I've already got this existing habit of doing what OmniFocus tells me to do, that it's very easy for me to put something in and usually I will do it. So I think that that's quite a powerful tool as well. Now, in terms of building these perspectives, again, as I said, a lot of that's kind of covered over on my website this week, but I will just call out one particular trick that I've used in a couple of these perspectives and that I use quite frequently, which is to use the rule in custom perspectives that is search results contain. So if I just jump into my projects list in OmniFocus, you'll notice that I've got in a lot of my single action lists, which I denote with this little infinity symbol here, I have action groups for habits and for routines. And as I said, I very rarely change those. They just sort of tick along and do their thing at this point. And because the action group has this little star symbol or this little, circular arrow, that's what I'm searching on to create those custom perspectives. So if I jump over to my habits perspective and have a look at the rule, you can see I've got this matches search terms and that little star. And because that star is in the name of the action group that contains these tasks, that's what pulls them into here. So I use that quite often. I use that in my habits. I use that in my routines. I use that in my starred perspective as well. So you'll notice that star, it's not a tag. It's not in the name of the tasks itself. It's just a star in the name of the project itself, but it matches this task. So that's something that can be quite useful that I use all the time. A lot of the aim of breaking up this view is to try and keep the lists feeling doable, achievable. Again, if I combined all of this into one big list, it would be a recipe for overwhelm. I would look at it and I go, oh my goodness, I have so much to do. I'm never going to get any of it done. What am I going to do? I'll just do nothing. I'll have a nap. I guess that's, again, one of my sort of overarching kind of philosophies in how I'm managing my OmniFocus database is trying to make sure I present myself with only things that I can do that are actionable, and also trying to prevent that sense of overwhelm, and I only want to see the things that I can actually act on in that moment. One of the ways that I'm doing this is by, you might notice that each of my tasks has the very first tag is a little star. And so I have either a filled in star or a kind of empty star. And to me, that kind of represents two broad contexts that I'm working in my day-to-day life. So again, I'm looking at this more from a personal angle than a work one. But because I have a 14-month-old, I basically have two states. One is he is napping and I can do whatever I like. I've got time to focus on something. And the other state is he's awake and nothing really productive is going to happen at the moment, because I'm going to be focused on making sure he's not, climbing into the toilet or whatever the case may be. I basically tag, that's how I kind of determine which of those tags I'm going to apply to a task. And what that allows me to do is to filter this list even further so that I have even less tasks on it. So I have a plugin written that's very specific to me, but basically what it does is it marks one of those tags on hold and makes the other one active. So obviously by making one of them on hold, all of the tasks that are tagged with that particular tag disappear, at least temporarily. So if I run that, for example, if we have a look at, I've got to vacuum my ensuite. Should have done it yesterday, didn't. So that's something that it's difficult to do with him in tow. So it's got a filled in star. And if I say, actually, Sebastian's awake, I've got to look after him right now, I have a keyboard shortcut set up to trigger this, but just to show you where it is in the automation menu, could just come in here and I could say, set my attention level to be unfocused. So that means Sebastian's awake. And what will happen is that anything that requires that high level of focus will disappear. And it's just hidden because that tag has been marked on hold. Similarly, I can do the same thing, and I can only see the, I apologize for I normally would just hit a keyboard shortcut for this, but I just kind of want to give you a better sense of what's going on. So I could enter a focus mode. So he's asleep. I can focus on doing some of these bigger tasks that I need to get done. And that means that I don't spend really precious time while he's napping, doing little tasks around the house that I could do at any time. So I can, even though I'm working in order, I still am focusing on probably what is the right thing for me to be focusing on right now. So I might just clear that so that we can see everything again. But obviously, as you can see, that really helps with keeping everything manageable. All right, so that's kind of where I'm going to leave, I guess, the introductory part of this, which is kind of the view that I'm looking at most of the time. We've just run our very first OmniFocus plugin for the session, which is the one that filters down the tasks. And that's probably what we're going to be focusing on mainly for the rest of the session. So as Tim sort of alluded to, I've become a little bit too obsessed with Omni Automation potentially. So I've gone a little bit overboard, but I've had a lot of fun doing it. I think it's just such a fantastic tool that the Omni Group has added into the software. The fact that you can run the same automations, the same actions on your Mac or on your iPhone or your iPad, there's so much potential there. And I think I'd love to see more people using it and more people writing plugins, but even just more people using the plugins that other people have already created. What we're going to do for the rest of the session is basically I'd like to show you some of the plugins that I'm using every day on a day-to-day basis. But before we do that, what I will do is I'll just take a minute for anyone that hasn't already played with Omni Automation at all, just to show you how easy it is to actually install an Omni Automation plugin in OmniFocus, because it's not, I think people are intimidated by this idea of knowing that it's written with JavaScript and it's code and it's this and it's that. But really, if you're just installing a plugin, it's so simple. You don't have to worry about any of that. And there's lots of great resources, as again, Tim alluded to earlier. I think, Tim, you've correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you've got a directory over on Learn OmniFocus as well. And as you said, omniautomation.com, Sal's got a bunch of resources, and I've got quite a few up on my website as well. So I'm just going to skip over to my website now, and we'll just download a plugin for an example. So I'm going to download this open URL from Note plugin, and it's just a simple download. So I'll download the zip file here and open that file in Finder. And then all you need to do is find this OmniFocus JS file, open it, it'll open in OmniFocus, and I already have it installed, so it's prompting me to replace the plugin, but what you actually need to do is just install it instead, hit that button, and it's installed. That's it. There's nothing more complicated to do than that. We've now installed our first OmniFocus plugin. The other thing that you might want to do is to come into your Omni Automation menu, and under Configure, you can set a keyboard shortcut for that plugin. So I've already set this up, but if you come in here and you type in your, it's not going to let me because I've already set it. There we go, it is set. But obviously if you hadn't set it up previously, then it would be blank. You'd type in the keyboard shortcut you wanted, and you would then be right to go ahead and use that as you like. So that's all there is to installing the plugin. So let's go ahead and use it. This is a really simple plugin, but I use it all the time. So all it does is looks for a URL in the note of the task that's selected, and then it opens it. So if it's got more than one link that it finds, it will ask you about that, and you can open one of them or all of them, or as you wish. So it obviously works for web addresses. So if I have this sort of demo task here that's got a note that just includes learnomnifocus.com, if I hit that keyboard shortcut now, it will open learnomnifocus.com. And so I use that all the time for various things. I like to denote tasks that have a URL in the note with a little arrow, so that I know which tasks that applies to, that I don't need to look and see if there's a link, I just know there is. So that's you can use it like that. It's not limited to web links though, so you can also use it, we were talking a little bit before the session about Obsidian or something like that. drafts, Keyboard Maestro macro, anything that you can launch with a URL, you should be able to run using this plugin. Let me know if you come across something that you think you should be able to run and you can't, and I will try and fix it. But so far, everything that I've tried has worked. So, for example, another thing we could do is link to another part of our OmniFocus database. If we have a look in this note, you'll see I've got a link to a tag. And so, again, if I hit that option, then I'm straight into that tag. And there's some preferences there as to whether you want OmniFocus links in particular to open in a new window or a new tab, or just stay where they are. But I use this all the time. And that leads me on to my next plugin, which is this scheduling plugin that I've written. So we talked a little bit about on my dashboard perspective, I have this today section, and that includes anything that's tagged. And typically, I like to kind of plan my week as part of my weekly review. I like to work out, what am I going to do in the next week? What day am I going to do it? When have I got time to do it? Which nap time am I going to slot this task into? Is often the question. So as part of that, I guess I'm thinking about 3 dates in relation to each of my tasks. I'm thinking about a defer date, which is the date that I can start doing something. I might not be able to do anything on it until that date. And so, for example, if I've got a lecture to watch for university, it doesn't get released until Monday. Monday will be my defer date. I can't do anything about it before then. And I think that's pretty sort of common practice in OmniFocus across people that are using it. The second date is also built in, and that's obviously the due date. So what's the date that I have to have this done by, or there is some kind of consequence. So again, if I have a lecture, for example, the due date might be in 3 weeks because I need to watch it before I can do an assignment that's due in 3 weeks' time. But the other date that I like to think about with the task is, what date am I actually planning to do this? Because it might be the case that the lecture is not available till Monday, and I need to do it sometime in the next 3 weeks. But actually what I plan to do is I plan to watch it right after it comes out. So I plan to watch it on Tuesday or Wednesday. And I like to kind of keep that in my head. I guess you could use time blocking for this. I found that like my day in the last couple of years hasn't been predictable enough to really make time blocking work, although I was doing it quite happily before I had a small human to mess things up. But yeah, so I guess I can make that distinction between a due date and a due date because of my Australian accent. You guys might struggle a bit more, some of you, but that's okay. You can write it down and it'll work fine. So that's what this scheduling plugin kind of is to help me with, and it's to help me manage that third date, which is the date that I plan to do whatever the task is. So if we have a look here in my sidebar, you'll see that I've got a number of tags here with dates on them, and these are basically the next 7 days. I also have recurring days here, and these are all generated by this plugin. Again, because of time zones, you probably won't notice that this tomorrow is actually today. So today here it's already the 17th of March, and that's only because I've paused this updating automatically just because I want to show you how it works. But typically what would happen is each day these would roll forward automatically, and any tasks that are here for tomorrow would be given a flag for today, or you can set it to use a tag instead if you prefer. And then that would obviously pull it into that today perspective. So I do all of this again using Keyboard Maestro, and at 1 a.m. every day, I run a series of actions, and a lot of these are all to do with my OmniFocus database. So I won't go into them too much. The first one of these just drops all of the tasks that have a tag. The second one and the third one add projects from templates depending on what the day is, and we'll come back to that a little bit later. The fourth one here tags any tasks that are due today, and that one is a plugin that's available on my website if you want to download it. It just goes through and says what's due today and gives it a tag that you can specify. And so that's the tag that I then use to create that first due soon perspective. And then this last one obviously is this scheduling plugin, and that rolls forward the day. So it checks what have I planned to do today and marks it with a flag basically, and it just reorders all my tags and creates a tag for any days that are missing, kind of does a general update. This can just for reference, it doesn't at the moment just because I don't have any tags planned further out than that, but you can schedule things further in the future than the next week. So you can put any date you like. And as long as you run this plugin after that date, this action, it will be pulled into that. It'll be flagged or tagged, and then you can obviously use that in your custom perspectives. And if you watch the tags over here, you'll see that they update. You'll notice that tomorrow I've got a practical task to do, and week 4, lecture 2 is what I've got to watch. What yesterday was tomorrow's task, but now is going to be today's task. So this will roll forward once I run this keyboard Maestro macro. So if I hit try, so you can see that date's rolled forward. All my days have gone back into order, and I've lost those tasks here, but that's only because they have now been flagged and come into this today view here. So you'll see that practical and that lecture were the two that we saw that needed to come in here. And the other thing that has happened is that this other tag's been created, and we'll come back to that in a second. Now, if I'm looking at my university work for the day and I decide, well, actually, I've got this Learn OmniFocus session this morning, I don't think I'm going to get 2 lectures and a practical in today, I can reschedule those tasks, and I can do that with any task in my database. I can schedule it for a particular date, and there's an action to do that as part of this plugin as well. So if I hit the keyboard shortcut I've got set for that, I can say, actually, I'm not going to do this today. I'm going to do it tomorrow instead. And because Omni Automation is so fantastic, we can use all of our regular date passing that you can do in any date field in OmniFocus. So if I want to say, oh, actually, I'm not going to get to that for 3 weeks, it will work that out for me, and that's fine. It's also got the little calendar option. So if you want to look at a calendar, you can do that. And if I hit reschedule, it'll lose its flag, and it will have that tag. You can see it's now tagged with the 7th of April, which is when I've said I'm going to do it. And if I clean up, then that obviously will leave that today perspective because it no longer has that tag. So that's the scheduling plugin that, again, is available if that's something that seems like it would be useful to you. The other thing that Keyboard Maestro macro has done is it's created a task based on a template. And so this is another plugin that I've created, and it's the one that I think Tim mentioned earlier, but I know that he uses, and I know that has been mentioned on the OmniFocus before as well. So again, this is something that I think is quite broadly useful, and you can use this in a number of different ways. So let me just open a new window and show you a really simple example of how this works. So I've got, if I hit my keyboard shortcut for this plugin, I can choose a template that I've set up previously, and I'll show you where those are stored in a minute. I can choose any of those kind of template projects that I've set up and create a new instance in my OmniFocus database. So for a simple example, let's say I've got to sanitize my cloth nappies and go to the created project. If I hit create, I can choose where I'd like to create that. So I'll just choose this first folder for now. Hit continue, and you can see that project's being created where I've said. And basically, this particular template is a really simple example. So this is equivalent to basically copying and pasting a project in your database. You might have it stored in a folder and copy it across or something like that. That's all this is doing. But the plugin has a lot more potential to do other things as well. So I'll show you a more complex example in a second. But for context, before I get into that, as I think I said earlier, I'm a tax accountant. So a lot of the work that I'm doing in my day-to-day job is fairly structured, in the sense that what will typically happen with a job that hits my desk is it's a job that I need to review. So someone else has drafted it up, and it's my job to check it, make sure it's right. And then from there, what could happen is a number of things. Now, those things are pretty well defined in terms of what happens next, but they're not necessarily known before I finished reviewing. And so a job goes through similar steps, but they're not necessarily combined in the same way. So at some point in the process of preparing work for a client, it probably will be reviewed by the director that that sort of talks to the client directly. We might have to send it to the client with questions. I might have to send it back to the person that's prepared it to make changes. All of those things are fairly common and could happen any number of times in any particular order. So obviously that makes it difficult to set up one template that manages all of that, because you don't know what the whole project's going to look like until you're in the middle of it. So what I've done is I've kind of broken that process or those templates into components. So let's say someone's given me a 2021 tax job to review. The first thing I'll do is I'll show you where those templates are actually stored. So I've got an action that will open that templates folder, and you can see here all of my templates that I've got set up. I've got, for example, here, I think it's this one, a template that is just the very first starting point that I would need to do for a 2021 tax job that I'm reviewing. And as you can see, it's only 2 actions, but it kind of sets out the format that I've got my project names in, so that that's consistent. It makes sure all the tags are applied in the way that I want them to be applied, and it just makes sure that everything's consistent every time, basically, even though it's not a really complicated process. What I can do is I can create this from a template. So I could do this exactly the same way, but because I use this one so often, I've actually set up a different keyboard shortcut, and I can put in here, so you can see that there's some placeholders. So I'm being prompted for the client and the preparer and the partner, because they've been specified here in the note for the project as variables that are used throughout the rest of the project, in names and things like that. So you'll see I can put in the client. So let's say we've got somebody proprietary limited, and the person that's prepared it, we use initials, so we'll call them ABC. If I hit continue, then that will create the project. I'll just need to navigate to it, just because. So you can see now that that's been created with the variables that I've put into that form. So ABC is the person that we said was preparing it. Somebody Proprietary Limited was the name of the company. And we've also got all of those details filled in the same spots here, just based on what the placeholders say in the template. Other things to note, we've got a due date in here that's automatically been set. So that's the 16th of May. We've also got a folder that's been specified, so that's where it's been created. We haven't had to specify that. And also, you're also able to use those placeholders in tags. So you can see this task here has been tagged with X, Y, and Z. Now, the thing about this is that the information that we've filled in is now included in this note for the project itself. So we've got all of the details here. And what happens with this plugin is if you create a, you can create a instance of a template that's a new project, but you can also create an instance of a template that's an action group within another project. And if you do that, what it will do is it will look at the note for the project, and if there's any of the same placeholders in that note that have already been specified, it will use those. So I've used this basically to be able to quickly add those next steps that I was talking about to this project. So if the next step, for example, is to send this back to the person that prepared it because they need to make some changes, again, I've set this up as a kind of custom Omni Automation action, but there's no reason that you couldn't do exactly the same thing with just the regular templates actions that are already set up. So it wouldn't require any coding. I've gone a little bit over the top and added some coding in because I can't help myself, but it would be achievable anyway. So if I hit that keyboard shortcut, I can say what's next. Again, I've got another list of templates that I can choose from, and I can say I need the preparer to update this. It will then add that template here as a task, and it will use all of that same information in populating all of that, all of those variables. So I don't need to enter it again, which obviously would be fairly onerous. So hopefully that's sort of demonstrated that there's quite a lot of flexibility with what you can do with these templates. There's some other things you can do. You can make a task or an action group optional. So when you create the template, you'll be prompted as to whether you want to include that. That's quite useful. I use it, for example, for my packing list. If I've got a trip coming up that I'm taking, you can set the defer date. You can use variables in dates. When you set these due dates, you can use all of the normal OmniFocus kind of relative dates that you're used to using. So you can set it to, when I create it, I want it to be due a week from whenever that is that I create it, for example. So I think there's quite a lot of power potentially that you could use here to really kind of break down how you're doing a job. Now, the other thing that we'll go on with now, we'll head back to the dashboard view here. I'll just close these. And I probably should just hide that templates folder so that it doesn't trouble us. Now, the other thing that you might have noticed is that I have quite a lot of tags going on here. So one thing that I talked about earlier was wanting to keep the number of tasks that are visible at any one time really limited to only the things that I can act on right at the moment. And another plugin that I use to help me with managing this is what I call the Defer Tags plugin. So in OmniFocus, we have the built-in capability to defer a task or to defer a project. And we can say, don't show me this task or project until next week, for example. We also have the ability to set a tag to on hold, but we don't have the ability to say, set it on hold, but only until next week or 3 o'clock or 4 weeks from now. And so that's basically what this plugin kind of adds. So if, for example, it's nearly 10 o'clock, so my partner's not asleep, but let's say that he was, and I didn't want to go into our bedroom or into our ensuite and wake him up. You can see here I've got a number of tasks that are tagged with ensuite, for example. If I select one of those tasks and then again I hit my keyboard shortcut, I can put in a defer date. Again, we can use all of our normal OmniFocus date magic, and I can say I don't want to see that until, I might just say 9:52, just because that will hopefully pop it back up again in a few minutes. It pulls all of the tags that are applied to the task that's selected to the top. So if you've gone a little bit overboard with your tags, like perhaps maybe I might have done, then hopefully that helps in finding the one that you actually want. So if I select the master bedroom here and hit continue, that will put the master bedroom tag on hold and also any sub tags. So I've got the ensuite set up as a sub tag of the bedroom because it's kind of off that room. If I hit continue, you'll see hopefully that all of those tasks now are not available. And if I clean up, they'll disappear. And what's happening in the background is that I've got Keyboard Maestro running another action that checks for any of the dates coming due that those tags need to become available again. So I think it runs every 5 minutes or something. So we'll probably see those pop back up in the next 5 or 10 minutes. It's not immediate, but I've found that level of granularity isn't really necessary. And this is quite useful. For example, there's someone in the office you need to speak to, but they're on leave till next Tuesday, or you're out of the house, don't have access to my laptop or anything like that. Can be quite useful. The other thing that you can do with this plugin that I have done, which I won't do a demo of now, just in the interest of time, is you can set up a kind of recurring schedule for a tag. So I have these set up for say for the supermarket or the library, or even sometimes they're more time-based. So I can do these tasks only within business hours. So that becomes available at 9 a.m, say, and disappears again at 5 p.m. on weekdays. And so that's quite useful, again, just in narrowing down that list of tasks to only things that are available right now. So the other plugin that I just wanted to quickly touch on, it's a little bit special to me because it's the first one that I created. So it sort of started me off on this crazy adventure of going a little bit nuts on Omni Automation. And that's my dependency plugin. So OmniFocus has pretty good support for managing dependencies between tasks. So I need to do this task before I can do this task. you can typically manage that pretty well by using parallel action groups and sequential action groups, and you can nest them to quite a great level of detail, and you can do quite a lot, and I have done, but it can become a bit messy. So I found, in particular with managing university tasks, where you want to make sure you watch all the lectures in order, and you want to make sure you complete all the exercises in order, but you've got to watch the lectures before you can complete the exercises, and it quite quickly becomes quite messy. And the other thing that you can't do natively is to make one task, a task in one project, dependent on a task in another project. There are a few workarounds. You can sort of make that happen. You can duplicate tasks. You can put yourself a reminder to, make a task available. But it's a little bit of a hacky kind of workaround. So what I've done is basically kind of implement a way of doing this using Omni Automation. So let's say I've got these slightly contrived tasks in my database, and I'll just get you to believe me when I say that they're in different projects in my database. So I've got this task. I've got to buy hypothetical ingredients at the grocery shop, and I have to bake a hypothetical cake. So obviously I need the ingredients before I can bake the cake, but because these are in different projects, they're both showing in my dashboard at the moment. I will just pause and just point out that those tasks from the on-suite have just popped back up. So they've become available again, that we deferred a little bit earlier. And so all I need to do to make this task dependent on this one is to hit one keyboard shortcut that runs one action over here. And then again, I come over here and I will run another action. So when I made that second task over here, dependent on this first one over here, that second task has disappeared, which is what it's supposed to do. Now we've still got this task here. And the other thing that I would just note is that the first task did have a due date. So in reality, this task should also have that same due date. And this plugin does have the option to update due dates automatically. And so if I say update due dates, hopefully all things going well, we can see that task there, the buying of ingredients, has popped back up in here into my due soon perspective, and it now has that due date of tomorrow. So that sort of more accurately reflects when it needs to be done by. And then when I mark that task off, you can't automatically run an Omni Automation action when you mark a task complete, but you can work around that in a couple of ways. So one is to have an action that does two things, which is one, mark the task complete and run the action that you need. So I've got that matched to a keyboard shortcut that will do that for me. The other option, depending on what you're trying to do, is you can quite often run something sort of intermittently in the background using Keyboard Maestro or something like that just checks everything and makes any updates that are needed. So I actually use both of those, but I will use the special action here just to show you what I mean. So if I tick that off, then we'll see the other task should, all things going well, there we go, and the other task will become available, even though it's in a different project. So that's not managed with sequential action groups or anything like that. That's an entirely separate task. So I use that quite frequently, as I said, for university tasks and things like that, where I like to keep the content separate from the assessments. I've got to do these three things before I can complete the assessment, but I want to see the assessment separately because it's kind of a bigger project that I need to manage. So will we run into some questions, Tim?
Yeah, sounds great and very, very impressive, Kaitlin. And Kaitlin really shows off what's possible with Omni Automation. And I think that if you've never used a plugin before, maybe don't try to start at this level. Instead, do something simple like what Kaitlin showed off at the beginning. Even just something simple like opening up a link. That's something I do all the time. It's incredible how useful that can be, and I can keep my hands on the keyboard, and I'm not having to be really precise with the trackpad clicking on a link. So maybe choose one that's one of the simpler ones to start with, and you say, okay, that was pretty easy. I'm going to use that for a week, and then start to layer on top of that. And
absolutely, yeah.
And Kaitlin, unfortunately, has done a lot of the work, so you don't have to figure all this out for yourself. She's got the plugins, and they're well documented, and you can maybe tweak them a little bit to suit your needs.
Improve them.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I'll just go through a few of the questions that have been accumulating here. So one is: do you store thoughts, ideas, notes in OmniFocus, or do you have somewhere else that you park that information?
So typically everything will generally start in OmniFocus. So I use the OmniFocus inbox as my sort of capture tool. In terms of, I honestly don't have a very good setup for managing kind of supporting information. We were talking a little bit before the session about Obsidian, and I think I need to invest a little bit more time there. I think I've gotten away with it to date just because of the nature of the kinds of projects that I'm working on. So they're either sort of personal projects and, I still store any supporting materials and things like that in the regular file system. I don't do anything really complicated there. I have some things in Obsidian. I'm trying to play with that a little bit, but it's quite new to me. And from a work perspective, so much of it is managed on our work systems that I really don't, I don't keep any of that separately in my own system. So I don't have to kind of track any of that too much. So I don't have any really pro tips to share on that front. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I think the key is not to overwhelm OmniFocus with all that information, because that can really kind of clog up the gears.
I was saying, sorry, earlier, I as far as someday maybe kind of tasks, I am playing at the moment with keeping them in Obsidian. I think I have had them in OmniFocus before, and I kind of like the idea of having them there because I have everything else there. And I keep toying with that idea and putting them in a separate action group and filtering that out kind of thing. I have kind of played with that, but yeah, I need to invest some more time in working out how I want to do that. But at the moment, I just have a couple of lists of ideas of things I'd like to get to at some point in the future. And as long as I've got them somewhere, I'm not too fussed on worrying about where that is.
And kind of along the same lines, a question from Heather. She says, you mentioned you put everything in OmniFocus. You put work emails you need to respond to in there. And what's your workflow for that?
I'm pretty fortunate at the moment because I've just come back to work part-time after having my son sort of in the last oh gosh, how long have I been back there now? Maybe 6 months or so, a bit longer, 8 months. I don't have a lot of email volume. So we're all, as I think I mentioned before, we're all on Windows at work. So I basically use I use a lot of the built-in filtering and things in Outlook to manage kind of the initial onslaught of email, to filter a lot of it away. And then what's left, typically what comes to me is, I need you to review this job. And then obviously I'll set up a template in here once I'm starting that job. We've got a list of the jobs that I need to work on next. So I typically don't put my work projects into OmniFocus until I start them, because I've got a list of what's coming up, and sometimes that changes depending on what else is happening in our team and things like that. So I don't like to sort of put it in OmniFocus and commit to it too soon. It's kind of very obvious what's next. So
yeah, okay.
I try not to over-engineer that. And other emails, if I get other emails that are something that I need to act on, then obviously I will put that in OmniFocus and I will save it in a particular section in my Outlook. But I don't have a really great integration between the two. And because my email volume at the moment is just not that high, it hasn't really been a problem, or not that high once I filter out all of the all of the the newsletters and the stuff that's actually related to jobs and that goes to everyone in the whole company. Once I get rid of all of that, I'm really not dealing with a really high volume of email, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay, makes sense. Yeah. Another question. One of the reasons I occasionally drift away from OmniFocus to do for habits is the way OmniFocus handles recurring tasks. How do you set yours up?
I do have one thing in particular that I think is quite helpful, and that's I'm going to sneak in another plugin here, but I do have the option. So one of the problems that I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to, but one of the issues that I know that I've run into is if you defer a repeating task, then it will also defer all of the future instances of that task. So say if I look at this task and I say, I haven't made our bed yet this morning, I'm in the middle of a Learn OmniFocus session, I'm not going to do it until after that's over. So I'm going to defer it till 11 a.m. Then tomorrow when it comes back, it's also deferred until 11 a.m. So obviously that's not what I want. So what I do, I have actually got a plugin that will help me to deal with that. And that is just here, and it's called Defer This Instance. So I can run that and it will basically drop that task. So it treats it as though you've skipped it. And I can defer that particular instance, like the new task, will now be deferred until 10. So you'll see that that's not a repeating task anymore. That repeating task is kind of does its thing as though I'd completed the task or skipped it. And that helps a little bit in managing that.
That makes sense.
You can see that is the problem. Yeah.
Yeah, I know in Do, the app DUE, you can have a task that repeats every day at 7 a.m., but you could change it for tomorrow to 7:30, but then it'll go back and it'll say, do you want to just change it for that one occurrence, or do you want to change all the future ones? So it would be great to have some equivalent in OmniFocus at some point.
So I also have a similar plugin that just duplicates and drops the task. So if you don't necessarily want to defer it, but you want to add a tag or something just to this particular instance, you can duplicate it so it marks it kind of as though it's completed or skipped. And then you've just got kind of a fresh, clean, separate copy of the task that you can manipulate, move to a different project, add a tag, whatever you want to do.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. Yeah. No, these are good examples of kind of limitations with OmniFocus that are solved with Omni Automation. And again, since Kaitlin's done the work for you, you can just benefit from essentially the new features she's added through Omni Automation. So it was a question about why you've got the star emoji in the name rather than in a tag. Maybe if you could just review that.
Yeah. So if I were to put the star emoji in a tag, what I like to do is I like to apply it to the project. And if you apply a tag to a project, there's potential issues that you've got there. So the first one is there is no rule that says if the project of this task is tagged with X included in this perspective. So that's not something that you can do using the built-in rules, at least not now. It might be added in the future, who knows. The other thing is that all of the tasks that belong to that if you add a new task to that project, it will also get that tag, which in this case probably wouldn't really matter. It would just be clutter that I don't need. It wouldn't really cause any problems, but I just prefer to do it that way, just so that I don't have those extra tags cluttering up the database really, and only have to worry about it once. And it's just as easy. So I use, if you're not familiar with Rocket, it's an app that kind of lets you use emoji in a similar way to what you might use in Slack or something like that. So you can simply start typing the name of an emoji and type it in. So I don't find it really very onerous to add the emoji. It's very easy to do. I don't particularly need a house there. Oh, yeah, let me demonstrate the star. So it's very quick for me to add that. And it also kind of, I guess, in this view here, for example, in this case, I don't have a star on this content, but it's kind of helpful for me to know as well when I'm looking at my today view where these tasks also quite often end up. I might not necessarily see a tag just because I have so many applied, but I know in this today view where I tend to see these tasks, that will be obvious as well. So I'll probably focus on that before I go back to cleaning my kitchen, for example.
I notice you use, in some cases, just an emoji for a tag, and that helps to keep it really compact so that if you had like a big long name, you might only see one tag, whereas now you can maybe see like 4 or 5, something like that.
Yeah, and I've got a pro tip on that as well. So what I quite often will do is set it up so that, for example, I've got a quick, this is kind of a tag that I use for quick, and I like to just see it as the emoji in the tag. But obviously, if you then want to add a quick tag to a task, it's a little bit more difficult because you've got to search for the emoji, don't necessarily know what it's called. Obviously, Rocket makes it a little bit easier, but it doesn't quite work that well. But what you can do instead, and if I just go back to a different task over here, because I've nested it under a tag that's called quick, if I type in quick, I can simply type that and we'll find it, and I can just hit the down arrow once and then add that tag directly. That's probably not.
Yeah, that's very clever. And you're essentially documenting what that emoji means in the context of OmniFocus.
Exactly, but you still get that little space saving in terms of where it's actually shown. I'll just apply that there.
Okay, excellent. And Felicity is wondering, is it best to keep my plugins on my Mac or in the cloud?
It probably depends a little bit on where you're intending to use them. So I think built-in you have the option to use them. I think the two default are on my Mac or iCloud Drive. I actually probably should move mine across to iCloud Drive, but they were kind of all set up before that existed, I think, before that was set up well. I think if you're intending to use them across multiple devices, then definitely go with the iCloud Drive option, because then you don't have to install it in multiple places. And if you make any changes or anything, you can, I was just talking to Tim before the session about, you can put them in folders within iCloud Drive. So then they will show up as submenus in the automation menu if you want to group things together. So if you want to set up that kind of structure or anything, obviously iCloud Drive is the best. You don't have to choose one or the other for all your plugins. You can pick and choose. So if there's a plugin that you only want to use on your Mac, by all means, just put it straight in the On My Mac folder. But I think if you're using multiple devices and you think you're going to use it across platforms, definitely share it across them. This is a classic case of do as I say, not as I do, because I just have all of mine locked in the one folder at the moment, and I probably need to go through and have a bit of a sort out of those in terms of where I use them and things like that. But yeah, it really doesn't matter in terms of playing around. You can always change your mind and move it later. It's not going to make
it's just
difference.
moving files around. Another advantage to keeping in the cloud is if you're setting up a new Mac from scratch, you just install OmniFocus, and all of a sudden all your plugins are there waiting for you. So that can be a nice bonus. Nick is wondering, how much time do you spend on your OmniFocus system, as it looks very high in maintenance? And I could guess what the answer is to this, that it's not that much time, because the automations take care of a lot of it for you.
Yeah, so it's a fun question. And I think I have spent quite a bit of time in setting it up and in writing the plugins. And I'm under no illusion that I've won back the time that I've spent in putting together the plugins and things like that. But for me, that wasn't really the point. I wasn't writing plugins to, make myself more productive. I was writing them. I'm studying computer science, so it's a learning exercise. I've learned quite a lot from the process of doing it. I really enjoy sharing them with other people and seeing them use them. And it's just fun. It's like a hobby. If the alternative for the time spent on writing those plugins was watching television, then I've had a net benefit. So that's kind of how I think about that. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend going and learning how to code Omni Automation plugins as a way of becoming more productive, because that won't work. In terms of maintaining the system now, though, that it's set up, again, yeah, you're right, Tim. It doesn't take me that long to maintain. A little bit of time went into setting it all up, but to be honest, I've been using OmniFocus. I went back and had a look. I think I started using it in 2014. So I've been using it for 8 years now. And so I didn't sit down one day and write out my system and set everything up from scratch. It sort of all happened naturally over time, as I thought, no, actually I need this. This could work better. So I don't really, it's always in front of me, but I spend very little time managing tasks in it. I probably sit down once a week as a weekly review and maybe spend an hour or two maximum. And that's clearing out inboxes, going through all of my project list, just making sure everything's up to date, checking my waiting on lists, checking what errands I've got to do, planning what I'm going to do for the next week. It's really not that much time, to be honest, in terms of maintaining it. Setting it up, yes, but again, it happened incrementally. And the Omni Automation side of it is, to me, I don't consider that as building the system or maintaining the system. That's something else that I do additionally to that. Hopefully that helps.
It's kind of self-maintaining in a way, because you have keyboard Maestro running in the background doing things for you when you're sleeping at night. And so,
that's right. If there's a lot of tasks, if you look at what's on my dashboard now, almost all of that, the habits and the routines just tick along. They just do once they're set up. Unless I add something new in there, I don't touch them. I don't even look at them as part of my weekly review, because I only go in if I notice something's wrong, which now happens pretty rarely. Obviously, when I was setting it up, there was a little bit more playing around with that. But I think the benefits, I set that all up before my son was born, and I think the benefits of having that there in those days when you haven't had any sleep and it's a bit of a disaster, to me that's been worth it.
Yeah, one thing I really like about your system in general is how you can so easily switch gears. So if your son's sleeping, you can switch into focus mode. You don't have to spend the next hour figuring out what to work on. You're just essentially flipping a switch and you're going and working on something else. And then he wakes up and you can switch back into that. And I think that's where a lot of people tend to struggle sometimes is they kind of try to plan out the perfect day and time block everything and so forth. But then as soon as something unexpected comes along, then things kind of fall apart. So that's, I think, again, one reason for using Omni Automation too is, and once you have these things in place where you can hit a hotkey and all of a sudden you've accounted for, my son just woke up or whatever the situation is, the power just went out or unexpected things like that. So I think one of the best times to sort of stress test a system is when you're in that unpredictable mode. And you can kind of see where it's lacking and which features you wish you had in there and which things you wish happened automatically and so forth. So maybe use that as some incentive to develop your own system and put in some of the automations. Kaitlin, you mentioned that you don't put a project into OmniFocus until you start it. Where do you stage them before then? So where do sort of candidates for projects typically land?
So that's not 100% accurate. So that was for work projects in particular. So because they're already documented elsewhere in work systems, they don't land in here until I start them. But I do definitely have, basically, as soon as I've decided that I'm going to do a project, I might not have decided when. So I guess it's a kind of a distinction between someday I'm going to do this and maybe I'm going to do this. So if it's someday I'm going to do this, it goes into OmniFocus. If it's maybe I'm going to do this, it's an idea, we'll probably put it into just a list in Obsidian that I can come back to. And again, that's where I've said I probably need to invest some more time in how I work that out. But at the moment, I'm honestly not dipping into that list very often because I've got enough going on.
Yeah, that's a good distinction. Someday and maybe are often kind of lumped together, but to me, they're two totally different lists. One is I'm committed to doing it, I'm not sure when, and the other is, I might do it at some point in the future, but I might never do it as well. So I think it is really useful to separate those out. Well, thank you so much, Kaitlin. I really appreciate you sharing your time here today and all of the plugins you've so generously shared with our OmniFocus community. And I'm seeing lots of great feedback and thanks from the chat as well. Things like mind blown and one of the best sessions ever. Yeah, excellent. So thanks again for all that feedback. And there's a question about how you did the colon typing. That's Rocket. You can also use Text Expander because that works on the iPhone, iPad, and Mac, because there's Text Expander integration on iPhone and iPad. So you could have for your favorite emojis, you could have even something like colon today or something like that, and you could give them whatever name you want. So that's another way to do it. But Rocket's great. It's an app I've used as well in the past.
Yeah, it's fabulous, and it's not expensive. I'm a cheapskate and I pay for it. So the other thing, I think I did see a question a bit earlier on about why using the star rather than flagging. And that's really just a mechanical thing because I'm using the flag for the today view already. That's why. So it's just to make a distinction. Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Kaitlin. Thanks to everyone who joined here live for all the great comments and questions. And
thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And I hope to see you all again soon, maybe at one of the office hours or virtual co-working sessions. Okay, take care. Bye, everybody.